Entitled HOA Karen Storytime in, D-Bag tries to enforce his own community rules while ignoring the already established ones, posted by Higure2. I live in a private community in Mexico with around 50 houses, and we have something similar to an American HOA, but this one is not legal and it doesn't impose fines. It collects monthly fees to pay gardeners and security. It also proposes community rules which are approved by the majority of the residents and are followed by almost all of them. Second, I have a duplex house. I live in the lower floor and I rent the upper one. 2 years ago, I had a tenant who got into a fight with all the neighbors about the constant parties she threw. They tried to call the police several times, but she never did anything illegal, never exceeded the maximum number of occupants under COVID restrictions, and never exceeded the noise allowed, and also followed the HOA rules by ending parties or leaving with her guest by around 2300 hours. The HOA was ticked, and the president, which I'll call D-Bag, was so angry, he decided to completely ignore all the rules and laws, skip the process to change the HOA rules, and just decided to dispose the tenant of her security service, which is opening and closing the entrance to the private community for her and her visits, until she stopped the parties, which she did since she didn't want to sue the HOA for only 1 month left in her contract. After this, I hated the D-Bag Karen and he hated me so badly because of some comments that I said to him in our last conversations, like, "It seems sad that an engineer like me knows the law better than you who's a lawyer," or "Such a shame my tenant didn't sue you, you almost had a case to defend." Last year, I adopted a puppy, which I'll call Cookie for the story, since one of the 3 parks in our community is in front of my house crossing the street that I train Cookie to go park, go pee, and go home. We usually do that 3 times a day and play catch 10 to 20 minutes each time. I have to mention, she is a very muscular 60-pound dog, mixed pit bull with something, but she's never bitten or acted aggressive in her life. 3 months ago, a lady I'll call Karen was walking by with her 2 children, about 5 to 7 years old, and probably was thinking about going to the park where I was walking towards with Cookie, and she started screaming about why I had a dog without a leash. Since Cookie didn't know them and they weren't in the park, she just ignored them and kept walking. But, oh boy, Karen was mad. She stayed in the entrance of the park in front of her children, waiting for me to put a leash on Cookie, which I ignored. And then she said that it was just a rule here, and I said, "Oh good, so what?" And then D-Bag appears, and it seems he is Karen's husband, makes sense now, and started saying it was a rule that all dogs must have a leash at all times. I just ignored him, saying things like, "Oh good, cool, whatever, don't care." But after they started to scream, I decided not to play catch with Cookie and told her to go home. After that, D-Bag said, "It would be a shame if a car hit your dog because it wasn't on a leash," which I answered saying, "There's a speed limit here, and I don't think anyone would hit my dog on purpose other than you." And then I followed Cookie home. Finally, for the climax. Last week, I was parking with Cookie and 2 other dogs in the car that I was planning to take that weekend. They were in the back seat in front of the park at the other side of the street where my house is. They were just taking a bath in the vet. Then I opened the door and Cookie ran to the park, both excited to play with the other 2 dogs and because she badly needed to go pee and didn't need to wait for me, since she was already on the other side of the street. And then I start hearing Karen shouts, the leash, put a leash on it." Then I see it's Karen and her 2 sons in the park again. I didn't see them before, and since the sprinklers were on in half of the park, I didn't think there would be people there. I just wasn't going to play and just let them pee and go home. So I grabbed the other 2 dogs and walked to the entrance of the park. And of course, since Karen and their children were in the park already, Cookie was upside down waiting for a belly rub. So we meet them next to the Karen who was in front of her children, like protecting them from a wild coyote, and then I said, "Cookie, go pee." And Cookie stands and goes to pee on the other side of the park, closer to the sprinklers. I was thinking I was lucky. It was only one of 2 idiots, but I guess I wasn't that lucky because 5 seconds later, D-Bag stands 2 feet in front of my face, and this exchange started. "How many times have I told you? You can't have a dog without a leash here." So I reply back, "So far, 2 times. "There have been plenty of times." It's not like that I'm keeping count. All this was happening with 2 kids with confused faces, a mad red-faced Karen and Cookie peeing in the background. I was very ticked now, and the exchange continued. "It is in the rules. Just follow them," D-Bag says. I reply, "Why would I follow any rules you established when you don't even follow them yourself? If you don't like seeing my dog without a leash," and I lost myself here, "there are 2 other parks closer to your house, so screw off." Then I grabbed Cookie by her collar because she wasn't going home without using the bathroom, but I didn't feel like waiting for it, and I walked with all 3 dogs to my house, saying to Cookie in a loud voice, "It seems they only come to this park just to annoy us, Cookie. Let's see how long it takes for their next appearance." We never had a rule about leashes in our community, and we haven't updated the rules yet since we haven't had any HOA meetings for it, so if it's in the rules now, it wasn't approved by the community. Housing association wants me to pay my late auntie's debt? No, pay me the money I overpaid instead, posted by Joshi. Before I lived in my current place, I was living with my auntie. She was the main tenant who sorted the bills, and I would pay her a lump sum each month as board payments. In early 2021, she passed away unexpectedly. Naturally, I didn't want to continue living in this place. Bad memories and bearing the responsibility for an entire place alone wasn't feasible for me financially at the time. After speaking with the housing association, I was informed the only way to end the tenancy would be by getting the tenancy agreement moved over into my name before terminating the tenancy when I was ready to move out. What I didn't know at this point was that my auntie was in arrears on the rent payment. When it came to the point of leaving the tenancy, I had money in savings and just settled up the rent entirely by paying about £500 of my auntie's arrears on top of the rent that I personally owed from living there alone. I then stayed at the place for a few more weeks before closing the tenancy. In hindsight, I probably should have queried the payment, but at that point, I just wanted rid of the place. After moving into my new place, I was getting pestered by the housing association who said I still owed £300 on the previous house. There was a lot of back and forth before I then asked for a copy of the rent statement. It was around this time that I was speaking to people about this money I supposedly owed. I was informed that I probably shouldn't be liable for my auntie's debt as I didn't receive the estate and was not the next of kin. However, there was an argument to be made that I was liable for the debt as technically my name was on the agreement and I became the main tenant. With this information in mind, I looked at the rent statement, worked out how much money I'd owed from the first week after my auntie had passed, and deducted it from my total rent payments made after that point. And it turned out I had paid £200 extra, assuming I wasn't liable for the debt. I presented all my working out in a thorough email and I sent it over. I didn't hear anything back from them after that, conveniently, and assumed it was all over. I decided to not pursue this as I was sick of being pestered by them, and I wasn't 100% sure if I was or wasn't liable for this money. Fast forward nearly 2 years, I received a letter last month, just before Christmas, stating that I still owed this £300 and it would be sent to debt collectors if nothing was done. At this point, I was ticked off. I spoke to someone who was able to tell me for sure that I am not liable for the debt in this particular situation. So I sent a firmly written email detailing how I don't owe this money, but in fact, they owed me, provided all the evidence, and threatened small claims if the situation wasn't rectified soon. It took weeks of me pestering them via phone calls and emails for me to be able to get in contact with a lovely woman who apologized on behalf of the company on how I was treated. She then got the ball rolling, and eventually my £200 refund cleared the other day. This was a particularly satisfying end, because if they would have just left it, I wouldn't have chased it up, and they would be £200 better off. What a shame. HOA's A Mansion and the View, posted by Flavius Lasavius. I lived in this town surrounded by magnificent vistas. There was a small development on the outskirts for upscale homes and mansions. Below the development were a few older homes. Many celebrities and business owners had vacation properties in the area, multi-million-dollar houses they used maybe 1 month out of the year. Real estate had always been at a premium. There was one older home among all of these giant view lots. A new buyer was a guy who'd owned a slew of RV dealerships and had obscene amounts of money, so he bought the most prominent lot on the top of the hill as he entered the development of maybe 20 lots. His project was a massive stucco structure with a multi-car garage and a much bigger RV storage space with a huge roll-up garage door. Think of the biggest RVs you've seen, and he had a garage built for it with an automatic door. The house was a nondescript sand color with a red tiled roof, and the entire lot was tastefully landscaped with different kinds of rocks, small mounds here and there, and a few shrubs to be low maintenance. The back of the property was fenced in with an about 8-foot or higher block wall. The fence itself probably cost $100,000. His neighbor was a school teacher who had lived there before the development started and had a modest house. He decided to take advantage of the skyrocketing land prices in the neighborhood and sell, except nobody wanted his crappy house when there were much larger empty lots available. He decided the real issue was that the new behemoth blocked his view, and that's why no one wanted to buy his 3-bedroom ranch house at mansion prices. It was really that his home didn't appeal to the market. So he became the president of the HOA, which included the older homes and the new development. And then the harassment started. The HOA had formed after the RV mansion construction had begun, but the home was so big it took almost a year to finish. The HOA had passed a design theme rule that all houses must be painted in a specific color palette, with the predominant color being a taupe that was darker than this man's standard beige stucco color house. The palette included the taupe and a selection of trim colors in pink, teal, or tan. It was intended to give the community a Santa Fe look and feel, which just so happened to be the color of the president's crappy house. The RV owner took the HOA to court, and the trial dragged on for a year. The guy never used the property, claiming it was still under construction during this time. He lost in court and had to repaint his property using only the design theme approved colors. So the guy brought out his contractor and had him repaint the entire property the Pepto-Bismol pink trim color. Everything was painted this color: the house, the fence, the trim, and the rocks in the yard. Then he had the massive driveway to the garage done in the same pink stamped concrete. Even the garage doors were pink. He locked up the house and never stayed there. The HOA was in an uproar because this house could be seen at the top of the hill for miles. None of the other lot owners broke ground. The president's home didn't sell for 2 years. El Winnie post piggybacking on other HOA posts, but with a twist. I'm on my HOA's board of directors. Okay, I'm the president. Shoot me. So our governing documents list any external change that requires an application. Fences, sheds, tree removal, things like that. Oh, and flowers, even annuals. The board didn't write the governing docs. The builder did, but we're still legally obligated to uphold them, no matter how ridiculous we find them. We can change them, but number 1, it's a big expense. Lawyers want dollars for some reason. And 2, we have to get 66% of the homeowners to agree to the change. We can't even get 25 people to a meeting, and we have 230 plus homes. Needless to say, it ain't happening anytime soon. Did I mention the board thinks it's a stupid rule? Unfortunately, we can't just ignore the rule if we don't like it. That can lead to homeowners saying things like selective enforcement and Neighbor Z planted flowers without permission. I don't need permission to build a full-size bird of prey replica in my backyard. So danged if we do, danged if we don't. Unless, in most HOAs, the homeowners can request a variance. If the rule creates an undue hardship, if the homeowner wants to install something in a setback or easement, and so on. The HOA doesn't have to approve it, but the option exists. Cue maniacal cackling. I hatched a plan, an evil plan. I created an online survey where homeowners could request a variance to the application requirement for flowers. Everyone who signed up received a digital waiver request, which was then forwarded to the board. The reasoning for the variance? I believe this restriction is unnecessary and overly burdensome as the exterior of my lot will not change, just the flowers in the flower beds. I agree to submit applications for all other items in the governing documents. I wanted to include something about the builders being poopy heads, but I saved that for a different day. About 40 homeowners requested the waiver and variance, which the board granted en masse. What do we have here? 20% of homeowners who don't have to follow a rule? Guess that makes the rule unenforceable for everyone. Flowers for you and you and you. Please no hate for being on my HOA's board. I realize that HOAs have bad reps for being governed by power-hungry, petty, and noxious Karens, but my board is pretty chill. Just mow your lawn, pay your dues, and bring in your trash cans. This HOA president is fighting for the homeowners. Wow, way to go, man. The HOA illegally fines me, but I'm not even part of the HOA, so I fight back. Click the video on your screen, you don't want to miss this awesome conclusion, and I'll see you there.